Dead Space is well regarded as having the best HUD in gaming. Honestly, it is also a personal favorite of mine because it is sick. While other games do have really inventive HUDs and honestly really good ones, I mean Halo comes to mind just off the bat, Dead Space really is just a cut above everything else. It is able to give the player all information that they're going to ever need and is built straight into the game, which really amplifies the immersion, especially in this sci-fi survival horror genre. But then the question is, why does Dead Space have the best HUD in gaming? Why do all of these people think that Dead Space's HUD is so effective? Well, today we're going to talk about just that. My name is Marks, and we're going to be diving in to explain why Dead Space does have the best HUD in gaming. First things first, we got to talk about what the HUD is. And HUD stands for Heads Up Display, which is basically all the information that you need to play the game properly. For example, this could be like indicators about health, ammo, mana, resources, all of that type of stuff to provide the player information so that they can do something with that and play the game. Notably, this is a little bit different from UI, which is user interface, which is essentially how the player is able to interact with said video game. For the sake of explanation here, HUD elements are part of the UI, but they're purely just informational to kind of give you a heads up as to what's going on in order for you to make an informed decision and interact with the game. For example, in this clip I'm showing from Resident Evil 4, every single time that bull guy is about to swing his hammer at me, you see the HUD element of press E to evade pop up onto the screen, and if you press E, you are interacting with the game in order to dodge out of the way, and Leon S. Kennedy is safe. Also too, when I get hit, you can see that the screen fills with blood, which is an indication for me to press that tab button, open the inventory, and then use my herbs so that I can heal myself up. The HUD elements are information for you to be able to play the game more efficiently. Better? Yeah, same potato. But different styles of games have different needs. For example, a Souls-like game is going to have very different HUD elements from a shooter. But ultimately, there are 5 elements, according to Pixoon.com, that make a good HUD. The first is game HUD design should be consistent with theme and style, so it blends into the actual game. The second is striving for maximum clarity and readability. Obviously, you want to make sure that this information is being delivered properly to the player and not confusing them. Consider smart placement of HUD elements, so you don't want it blocking the screen so that they can't actually see what's going on in the game. Keep your game HUD design on a needs-to-know basis. A lot of games nowadays are throwing all sorts of information at you all the time, and there's a tipping point where there's just too much information that you kind of blur it all out. And a lot of shooter games nowadays where the numbers pop out, those are kind of an example of that. And lastly, make it customizable where you can. This one fits more into the MMORPG category style of games, and as well as like Civilization, Baldur's Gate 3, but not really relevant to shooters. So in summary of those 5 points, the best HUD is something that gives you all of the relevant information without blocking gameplay elements or really overwhelming the player. And on top of that too, should help with the player's sense of immersion. And now to answer the question, why is Dead Space's HUD the best in the business? Well, at a very surface level, it's designed straight into Isaac's suit, and everything is in universe. And so there pretty much isn't really any HUD elements in the game because everything is just a part of Isaac doing his own thing in the actual game itself. And to understand why this is so effective, we need to dive into the UI design philosophy Visceral Games used in order to make this the most immersive experience ever. Is it visceral or visceral? I'm just gonna go with Visceral Games. Visceral Games' Dino Ignacio gave a talk about Dead Space's evolving UI at GDC 2013, and there was a core principle that they stuck to for their UI which resulted in the HUD being as amazing as it is, and this is known as diegetic. I know it sounds like a really fancy term, but this is actually something that you may be very familiar with across all sorts of different media. At the core, something that is diegetic exists both for the audience member, which is namely yourself, as well as in universe, in game, in movie, in TV show, all of that type of stuff. So this one thing belongs both to the audience member as well as the people who are in the actual media. One of the easiest examples of this is the beginning of Guardians of the Galaxy, where we get to watch Star-Lord put on the headphones and then Come and Get Your Love starts playing in his ears, but it starts playing as a soundtrack for the audience as well. Thus, this music both exists for Star-Lord, who is listening to it through his headphones, and also to the audience member. And ultimately, you know that this is definitely the case because even though he's dancing around and moving away from the screen and all of these cuts are happening, the music stays consistent. So it is both for the character and for the audience watching it. And ultimately, keeping things diegetic is the main reason for Dead Space's successful HUD design. And that philosophy of keeping things diegetic is the reason why Dead Space is so successful with its HUD and UI design. So embracing this philosophy of keeping things diegetic, The UI, and thus the HUD, is able to be as immersive as possible and non-intrusive to the actual player, which is something that you can see. The easiest example of this is when you hold up your weapon and aim down sight at enemies. Now the lasers are pointing out as Isaac is aiming it, but for the player it indicates where you are aiming in order to better orient your mouse or controller, whatever you're using, in order to shoot your enemy. The bullet number pops up. Obviously that is important to Isaac, because if you're shooting a bunch of undead necromorphs coming at you, you want to know how much ammo you are, but it also informs the player the exact same information, so you know if you need to reload or back up or do something to run away. The health bar on the rig is a visual representation of Isaac's health, probably in universe used by the engineers to make sure that everyone is okay, but this shows the player the health bar in order to make sure that, you use a med kit in time before you just kind of die. The stasis meter on the suit is probably about the same. It would serve a purpose in universe, but it does tell you how many shots you have left of stasis. And most importantly, as you zoom out, all of those elements related to gunfire disappear. They're no longer necessary in the moment, and so we can just kind of clean the slate full of that. And where the core principle of keeping things diegetic really shines is that everything the player needs informationally as part of the HUD is part of Isaac's suit, and thus part of the universe. All those indicators belong both to Isaac and the player, thus truly achieving a diegetic design. What makes it beautiful is in this diegetic design, there is absolutely no need for traditional HUD elements, like having that health bar or that ammo indicator, or even like a mini-map really, that you would expect to see just laced around the screen. It achieves the goal of not overwhelming the player with information or obstructing gameplay because it simply is in the same plane of the gameplay. It keeps things extremely simple, not hovering on top of the gameplay area as most other games do in order to not break immersion, and information is really given on a needs-to-know basis without it being too complex to find what you're looking for. For example, as soon as you put the gun down, the ammo indicator disappears, but if you ever want to check your ammo, then you can just aim down sight again and it will pop right up for you if you need it. This also 100% increases immersion because unless you press the pause menu, everything in the world is diegetic. Every time you interact with the store, open the map, use a bench, the game doesn't pause. Isaac is right there on the screen doing the things that we, the player, are doing. And this is especially important in a survival horror game, where the designers want to make you feel like you are also trapped in the claustrophobic Ishimura. And thus, Visceral Games' design philosophy of keeping things diegetic created the best HUD in video games to this date. I genuinely, I was really thinking about it while I was writing the script on this one, and I can't think of another HUD that is just so simple, yet so complex and so well done compared to Dead Space. I also highly recommend watching the UI design lecture from GDC because it is really interesting. I'll put the link down below in the description. And while it is more just about the general UI design philosophy, I wanted to explore the HUD elements with this video because I think that it meets a lot of the requirements for what makes a good HUD. And so with that, do you agree with me? Do you think that Dead Space really does have the best HUD out there? Let me know down below in the comments, and let me know other games that you think have extremely good HUDs as well. I already mentioned off the top that Halo, which is another shooter, I think is really cool because it's like a part of the Master Chief's helmet. But at the same time, I really liked Baldur's Gate 3's HUD, but there's a lot of customization there, of course, and it can be a little bit overwhelming at times, but I think that it is a really well done way to play the game, especially if you switch between controller and keyboard. But okay, that's gonna wrap up this video. And hey, while I've got you here, why not check out this video that I did where I used statistical modeling to predict Game of the Year for 2024, and well, the Game of the Year is already passed at this point, so you can see whether or not that was a right prediction or not. And so what I'm going to be presenting here, my model only relies on Metacritic score as well as the Golden Joystick Awards that have been won that year to predict what the Game of the Year is going to be. Next step is to take all of the current Game Award nominees and let's take a look at what their Metacritic score is, as well as the number of Joystick Awards that they have won this year. As you can see, it's pretty interesting to take a look at this.